With all the insanity that happened in the previous chapter, including destroying much of Jupiter and one of its moons, it's no surprise that the arc is finally winding down. A bit. In this final installment of the battle between Saitama and Garou, we get some much needed info on the time travel effects, like who actually knows what went down. We're also shown how intense some heroes get towards powerful villains like Garou, and how few people want to keep him alive. And so now let's dive right into the details, shall we? As we know, the last chapter ended with Saitama holding Genos' core from what I'd like to call the darker timeline, with no idea how it would fit into this alternate version of events, seeing as Genos is still alive now. Well, luckily we get right into that with this latest chapter called Daybreak. The cover page features a beautiful shot of a sunrise in the aftermath of a long struggle, with Saitama holding onto Genos' torso like a football. This actually turns out to be a spoiler for the final moments of the chapter, but we'll get to that later on. From there, we move on to Garou suffering from the zero punch he'd received from Saitama in the previous chapter. And here he was shocked at how sudden and powerful the hit was, his borrowed power leaking out through the hole in his monsterized shell. Funnily, he doesn't even recognize the person who caused this is Saitama because he didn't see where it came from, and he thinks that it would put that baldy to shame. And man, to think that Saitama surpassed his own self so much that Garou couldn't even recognize him. From there, the lower level heroes who are no longer dead from the radiation like they were previously surround Garou, preparing to get their revenge on a weakened hero hunter. They look more like a gang than heroes, with their fists balled up and angry stares. Garou looks at them blandly, seeming to know what's coming but not afraid of it. But there's no time to worry about that. Saitama is holding Genos' core, but not sure why he has it in his grasp, nor how Genos is alive since it is outside of the cyborg. If you recall, in the last chapter, future Saitama and his past version combined to form a new present version, and he somehow brought the core with him through it all. Oh, and his suit came back together, but the crotch was missing for some reason. Anyway, he tied a knot in the fabric, so now his jewels are covered at least. With both Saitama and Genos confused at this additional core, the cyborg has the bright idea to connect a wire to it so they can activate it. I'm pretty sure Genos was not expecting to have to see his own death, along with the disastrous outcome that was averted through his own core, but here we are. The fight, the dying heroes, blast portals, Genos' death, and the destruction of Jupiter. All of it is revealed to him. But as predicted, Saitama has no recollection of the previous events, including his own growth. But now, thanks to Genos' quick thinking and it being his technology that was brought back, at least he knows the truth. For a second, Genos seems to glitch with the overload of information, having not been prepared for it at all. But in just a few moments of staring at the glowing core, the young cyborg demonstrates his analytical skills once more. He pieces through the visions along with the current situation and comes to the right conclusion. Saitama and the core came from a different timeline. Not only that, but he changed what would have come to pass. To try and confirm this theory, he asks Saitama if he remembers anything, which he doesn't. Even in normal situations, the Baldy's memory isn't very reliable. As Genos points out that his sensei and the core came from the future, Saitama ends up looking all the more confused, and so Genos has no choice but to explain more clearly. And then we are subjected to Genos' trademark rambling explanation that Saitama can barely listen to because it goes on for way too long. But because we as readers should have more of an attention span than Cape Baldy, I'll summarize what Genos is saying. Basically, Genos is a theory about there being parallel universes, and that Saitama went through time and caused the events to go in a different direction through direct involvement. This created a divergence, but Genos isn't sure if this was triggered by the decision to step in at that moment, or when he actually threw that punch from the future point in time and stepped into the past. Either way, because Saitama fixed whatever deaths and destruction that occurred, he rejoined with his present or past, depending on how you see it, and no longer remembers what he did to get there. And this, Genos points out, includes finding a way to transcend time and space to save all the heroes who died due to radiation poisoning because of his flawless sense of heroism. Let's not forget the fact that he knows, even without having witnessed the fight, that Saitama would never lose to Garou regardless of the circumstances. And wow, could Genos have gotten it more spot on if he tried? I think not. Of course, when Demon Cyborg gets into the actual mechanics of time travel, the words go in one of Saitama's ears and out the other. But I think this is more for the sake of the author not having to come up with his own reasoning for it. Time travel is a complicated and highly debatable topic after all. But before we continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel with notifications on and like the video so you won't have any regrets like Garou did. With Saitama glad to see Genos alive and having no recollection of previous events, we have to assume he's back to his old self, right? He is no longer the man that created a universe within himself. Saitama's short attention span strikes again, and as his pupil watches him closely, his eyes drift sideways. Taking this to mean that Saitama wants the other heroes to get credit over him again, Genos compares it to the time he killed Deep Sea King. Too bad that is not what's going on this time. Pushing that aside, he continues to ruminate on the events that transpired. Genos seems kind of proud that he's aware of what Saitama went through to save everyone, and he's glad to be the only one to know the secret, even though he's convinced his sensei is pretending not to remember. Interestingly, Genos decides instead to let Saitama know that he succeeded at arriving in time to save everyone. This might greatly affect Saitama, who constantly had fears it to never arriving at quite the right moment. It could even lead to him pushing himself to react faster and care more if he remembers these words during a future catastrophe. Deep down, we know Genos' words are wrong though, because Saitama had failed to save everyone and didn't even have any idea of how to undo their deaths. If not for Garou, the heroes and young Tadao would still all be dead right now. So who's truly the hero, I wonder? Of course, Saitama is confused by Genos mentioning that, since he knows he is not a punctual hero. But at least we have someone on the inside to share this knowledge with us. We then focus on a face-down Tadao, no longer dead, who slowly wakes up from someone calling his name and urging him to get up. Lying in the rubble all on his own, the boy jumps up as if jolted back to life. There's still blood running out of his nose and on the ground, but he'll survive this time. He is then greeted by the sight of Garou in a spirit form, the one that risked it all to bring Tadao back to life. Garou's smile is so kind and clearly relieved as his body dissolves into pieces. He accomplished what he wanted to do, so he no longer needs to be in the future anymore. Seeing this, of course, Tadao rushes to him, but he cannot catch up because he is already gone. That's when Tadao, still looking for his uncle, hears he strikes and kicks from the heroes as they gang up on the existing Garou, who can no longer fight back since losing his divine power. With dozens of heroes pummeling him, it's hard to picture them as the good guys with how they're acting. They leave Garou's face bleeding, kneeling on the ground, but the hero hunter refuses to lose face. And why should he? In a way, he decided this was a better fate for him in the world if it meant saving Tadao and showing how cruel heroes truly are. At least that's what his future self believes. How would the current Garou know those feelings too unless the spirit he saw earlier went into him? The same way Saitama's future and past selves did. As Garou taunts them to continue beating him, one person steps forward. After all, not all heroes are corrupt and cruel, and one such man is Metal Bat, who tries to get the angry mob to stop. Perhaps because he saw the good in Garou when they worked together to defeat Sage Centipede. Anyways, the heroes argue that Garou deserves it for what he did to them, and even Sweet Mask joins in, saying the decision to execute him is unanimous. This is mainly because of his hatred of monsters and of something within himself that he's been hiding, but that's another story. His excuse for allowing this treatment, however, is that if they don't stop him now, the Garou will incinerate them all. Even with the idol hero trying to exert pressure on Metal Bat, he refuses to agree to that kind of behavior. And of course, Saitama joins in, probably still holding on to the belief that he's a human and not a monster. In an attempt to change the subject, or just out of curiosity, Saitama asks how Garou was taken down to begin with. After all, that was kind of what he was supposed to do. We know it was a time-hopping Saitama flying through a tunnel of time and throwing a massively upgraded punch. But because Saitama also had his extreme power growth from fighting Cosmic Fear Mode Garou, who copied both his and Blast techniques, it seemed to look more like the #1 hero's doing. At least that's how Flashy Flash sees it. Plus, he points out that he was naked. Both Sweet Mask and Sekingar are blown away at the mention of Blast having played a part, as he is known to only get involved in world-ending situations. And again, the naked part comes up, but even Genos chooses to ignore addressing that. Now this is where things get interesting though. Seeing as Genos is technically the only one who knows what truly happened and how things were turned around for the better, he believes only Saitama can decide Garou's fate. Genos doesn't really explain his reasoning behind that comment. It makes me wonder if he's unsure about Saitama's memory, or if he thinks he's really good at playing dumb. Regardless, Saitama points out how Garou is allowing everyone to beat him without fighting back. He even suggests allowing them to continue, since it is not having much effect, and it will tire out eventually. And there it is, that is the broken logic from Saitama that we know and love. Besides, Garou definitely is not acting like the punk he usually is, always set on proving how strong and durable he is in a fight. And others begin to notice this as well. Zombie Man steps forward then, wanting to know about how Garou gains so much power besides monsterization. He even mentions God, as he knows of it through Homeless Emperor and his death to the entity. Garou stays silent, blood dripping from his face. With that, Flashy Flash recalls Blast mentioning the same God, and Saitama, despite having been there too, doesn't remember at all. And man, where is Saitama's mind during all these important moments? Seriously. Garou then laughs maniacally, denying any existence of a higher power, saying it was all himself. He is clearly playing up his role as a villain just to try and end things quicker. And he even encourages them to kill him. Zombie Man, being the great detective that he is, notices Garou's desire to die at the hero's hands. His face turns very stern at that realization. Saitama has an unexpectedly similar look on his face. But then, taking Garou's words as permission, a crazed-looking Sweet Mask prepares to send the final blow at him. Thankfully, that's when brave little Tadao throws himself at the idol's feet, gripping so tightly he cannot ignore him, while he shouts, "Wait!" Garou is visibly shaken by the child's reaction to his near death. Not just him, but Child Emperor and Waganba can't believe it either. Even King is taken aback by the sudden desperation that the boy is showing. Not unlike the time when Moomin Rider convinced Tank Top Master that killing Garou was unhero-like, Tadeo accuses the heroes of being mean and not acting like they should be. With tears streaming down his face, Tadeo says that he's been saved so many times by Garou, and in turn, he is trying to repay him by holding on to Sweet Mask's leg as hard as he can so his uncle can escape safely. And for us, of course, it hits even harder since we know that Garou used the very last bit of God's borrowed power to ensure Tadeo would make it through somehow. King seems to have his own moment of realization when he remembers who Tadeo asked him to protect in the past, his uncle. The same uncle who was on the ground asking to be killed by the heroes and seconds away from being executed by Sweet Mask. Speaking of the idol hero, he looks down at Tadeo with a downright evil expression on his face. He is certain that the only way an innocent child would defend the hero hunter is because he has been manipulated into it. Tadeo completely denies this, and good on him for not crapping his pants from that look. Another absolutely terrifying look appears when Sweet Mask tries to force a smile and convince Tadeo that they weren't hurt Garou too badly. And man, who would trust a face full of veins like that? Plus, he vocally just said he was going to execute him. Tadeo is not deaf, and we certainly witnessed that too. While the heroes all debate whether or not to kill Garou, or whether to just take him in so he can't cause any more damage, King steps forward with his roaring engine and fierce expression. King has clearly had enough of this behavior, and in front of a child no less. The small fry heroes all step aside immediately, feeling his intimidating aura that we haven't seen in a while. They all stop speaking immediately. Shockingly, even Sweet Mask holds his tongue when King turns a vicious glare at the violent hero as he tries to protest. Man, for someone with such a weak body, it must be nice to scare people into listening to you. Having taken that moment of quiet to rush over to Garou, Tadeo clings to his uncle, tears still in his eyes as he looks up to King. That's not where Team Save Garou ends though. Bang makes sure to let his ex-student know that he can't just throw his life away. And that's because he needs to make amends for everything he has done up to this point, and spend his life saving others now. This seems to finally get through to him, his expression stern and focused. Saitama agrees with that idea, remembering how he saved people already as the absolute evil. He even encourages Garou with a good for you. Continuing on, Saitama points out that those around him pushed him to show his true colors, the real Garou. With blood still seeping from his wounds, Garou can't seem to comprehend that he is being kept alive. One last time, he tries to pretend he is a monster to be feared by telling Saitama he will regret this decision. We know without Garou, there would be no Genos to keep Saitama grounded. But beyond that, Garou inadvertently saved Genos and King from the monster executives in the past, Platinum S and Evil Ocean Water. And so Saitama makes sure to thank him for that. At that, we get a flashback in King's mind, where he was discussing with Saitama about what to do with the whole Garou situation. Even then, Saitama made it clear who saved King when he wasn't able to be there in time. That last comment of gratitude, along with the support of some of the most beloved heroes, seems to finally push Garou to accept his new fate. With a small smile and one final rebellious comment, Garou leaps away, and none of the heroes can keep track of where he went. With all of them wide-eyed and well-placed rubble covering Zombie Man's naked body, Garou is gone. Everyone is shocked at the quick escape. Well, except Saitama, who watches exactly where he goes and purposely doesn't tell the others. I don't know how no one sees Saitama looking right up at Garou and still they can't figure out where he went. Some heroes they are, huh? With a solemn expression, Genos firmly believes Garou will be back to his old self in no time. It's odd that despite Genos knowing the truth of time travel, he still has his doubts that Garou will turn his life around. This likely means he didn't see the part where he taught Saitama how to travel back in time. Regardless, Saitama isn't worried for the hero hunter and expects Bang to be able to watch over him if need be. And hey, even with all that, the chapter isn't over though. Metal Knight appears, using something like a fusion of a tank and a drill to dig out of the ground, nearly injuring the people who were standing nearby. With the threat no longer around, Metal Bat prepares for aftermath cleanup. And this involves hundreds, or maybe even thousands of robots under his control, getting rid of the nuclear fallout caused by Cosmic Fear Mode Garou in the past. Then, as if describing the weather, Metal Knight says a ship of his caught a nuclear blast. And man, if he has that kind of technology, I would really hate for him to ever turn evil, which some might argue is already the case. Afterwards, the people nearby were all expected to go through some testing and treatments to get rid of the radiation in their systems, which only makes sense. Saitama sighs, and so do we. At long last, the battle with the human monster Garou is over. But Saitama still needs to find his house, or what's left of it in this tide pool. Not to mention, Genos needs to see Dr. Kusheno to be fixed up, and maybe start using dual cores. Who knows? What an absolutely amazing arc of One Punch Man this is, and surely, the story is going to continue getting better and better. But there is one thing I am very curious about. Do you guys think that Genos' knowledge of that alternate timeline is going to play a role again later on? Let us know in the comments. As always, I'm Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.